My fiancé and brother were always just friends until I found her pregnancy test. When confronted, they confessed everything. My own father said family comes first and chose them. Watch until the end. Subscribe to the channel and write where you are watching from in the comments. I never thought my life would shatter into 1,000 pieces in a single night. My name is Eric, and 6 months ago, I was about to marry the woman I thought was the love of my life. Sarah and I had been together for 3 years, and everything seemed perfect. We had our dream house picked out, discussed having children, and even chose names for our future kids. I come from a close-knit family. My father raised my younger brother Jake and me after our mother passed away when I was 12 and Jake was 10. Dad always emphasized that family sticks together no matter what. We were inseparable growing up, and I always looked out for Jake. When he struggled financially after college, I didn't hesitate to offer him our spare room until he could get back on his feet. Big mistake. When Jake moved in with Sarah and me 8 months ago, I noticed how well they got along. I was actually happy about it. My brother and my future wife becoming friends. What could be better? They would joke around, watch the same TV shows I wasn't interested in, and sometimes go grocery shopping together when I was working late. I remember coming home one night to find them laughing on the couch, watching some comedy show. Sarah's head was thrown back in laughter, her eyes sparkling as Jake mimicked one of the characters. I smiled, thinking how lucky I was that the two most important people in my life got along so well. What a fool I was. The first sign something was off came when I noticed Sarah acting distant. She would be on her phone constantly, smiling at messages but quickly hiding the screen when I approached. When I asked who she was texting, she'd say just friends from work or my mom. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Then came the nights she would stay at the office late. Sarah worked as a marketing executive, and busy periods weren't unusual. But suddenly, these late nights became more frequent. She'd come home smelling of alcohol, claiming the team had gone for drinks after finishing a project. Meanwhile, Jake had started acting weird around me too. He would avoid eye contact during our conversations and seemed jumpy whenever Sarah entered the room. At the time, I chalked it up to stress from his new job. One night, I came home early from a business trip that got canceled at the last minute. I thought I'd surprise Sarah. Instead, I was the one who got surprised. Our apartment was dark except for the dim light coming from our bedroom. I heard muffled voices and laughter. As I approached the door, the sounds became clearer. I didn't want to believe what I was hearing. I stood frozen outside our bedroom door, listening to the unmistakable sounds of my brother and my fiancé having sex in our bed. My blood ran cold. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. A part of me wanted to burst through the door and confront them, but another part, the part that couldn't face the reality of such betrayal, made me turn around silently and leave the apartment. I drove around aimlessly for hours, my mind replaying what I'd heard over and over again. How long had this been going on? Was everything between us a lie? I called my best friend Mark, who immediately told me to come over. I spent the night at Mark's place, ignoring the flurry of texts from Sarah asking where I was. The next morning, I returned home to find both Sarah and Jake looking worried. "Where were you?" Sarah rushed to me. I was so worried. The audacity of her concern made me laugh bitterly. "Were you really worried, or were you just afraid I found out about you too?" Their faces drained of color. "What are you talking about?" Jake tried to sound confused, but his voice trembled. "I came home early last night," I said flatly. "I heard everything." Sarah burst into tears while Jake looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "Eric, I'm so sorry," Sarah sobbed. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "How long?" I asked, my voice eerily calm despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. They exchanged glances, which only fueled my anger. "How long?" I repeated. 3 months, Jake finally admitted. 3 months. While I was planning our wedding, picking out rings, and talking about our future, they were betraying me in the worst possible way. I told Jake to pack his things and get out. Sarah begged me to listen, to give her another chance, but I was beyond hearing her excuses. I told her I needed space and that she should stay with her sister for a few days while I figured out what to do about our apartment and the wedding we had planned for just 2 months later. The next day, as I was sitting amid half-packed boxes of Sarah's things, my doorbell rang. It was my father. "We need to talk, son," he said gravely. I let him in, assuming he had come to support me. After all, Jake and Sarah had betrayed not just me but our entire family's trust. Dad sat heavily on the couch, looking older than his 60 years. "Jake called me," he began. "He told me what happened." Then you know why I can't have either of them in my life anymore, I said. My father sighed deeply. Eric, I understand you're hurt. What they did was wrong, but I couldn't believe there was a but coming. But he continued, Jake is devastated. He made a terrible mistake, but he's still your brother. And Sarah, well, there's something else you need to know. My heart sank. What could possibly make this situation worse? Sarah is pregnant, Dad said quietly, and the baby is Jake's. The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the coffee table to steady myself. They confirmed it yesterday, Dad continued. That's why Jake called me. He's stepping up to take responsibility. I laughed humorlessly. Stepping up after sleeping with his brother's fiancée, you want me to applaud him for that? No, of course not, Dad shook his head. But Eric, this is family we're talking about, your niece or nephew, my grandchild. I stared at him in disbelief. Are you seriously taking their side? I'm not taking sides, Dad insisted, but his next words betrayed him. But family has to come first. You've always been the stronger one, Eric. Jake has always looked up to you. He needs your forgiveness. Forgiveness, I was shouting now. He slept with the woman I was going to marry. She's carrying his child, a child that should have been mine. Dad reached for my shoulder, but I jerked away. Eric, listen to me. What they did was terrible, but now there's an innocent child involved. We need to think about what's best for the baby. And what about what's best for me? I demanded. Does that matter to anyone? Of course it does, Dad said, but sometimes in life we have to put others first. Jake and Sarah made a mistake, but they're owning up to it. They want to raise this child together. The implication hit me like a truck. Not only had they betrayed me, but they were planning a future together, with my father's blessing. Get out, I whispered. Son, get out, I roared. If family comes first for you, then clearly I'm not part of that family. Dad left with a sad shake of his head, and I collapsed onto the couch, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The next few weeks were a blur. I called off the wedding, sent a brief explanation to guests, and moved out of our apartment into a small studio across town. I took a leave of absence from work and ignored calls from everyone, including my father. Mark was my lifeline during this time. He helped me move, brought me food when I couldn't bring myself to leave the apartment, and most importantly, never once suggested I should forgive Jake or Sarah. One evening, about a month after everything imploded, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a picture of a sonogram. Moments later, Sarah called from the same number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Please don't hang up, she said immediately. I thought you should see your niece or nephew. Why would you think I'd want that? I asked coldly. Because despite everything, I know you, Eric. You're a good man, the best man I've ever known. What we did, it's unforgivable, but this baby is innocent. Is that why you're calling, to remind me about your baby with my brother? No, Sarah's voice cracked. I'm calling because I made the biggest mistake of my life. I destroyed the future we could have had together, and I'll regret that forever. Save it, I cut her off. You and Jake deserve each other. We're not together, Sarah said quietly. Not like that. That caught me off guard. What do you mean? After you found out, Jake panicked. When we learned I was pregnant, he said he would do the right thing, but he's not you, Eric. He's not ready to be a father. He's already talking about shared custody and how he can't give up his freedom. A part of me felt vindicated hearing that Jake wasn't the stand-up guy he was pretending to be, but another part, a part I hated, felt sorry for Sarah and the baby. That's not my problem, I said, trying to sound indifferent. I know, Sarah whispered. I'm not asking for anything, I miss you. Not a day goes by that I don't hate myself for what I did to you. I ended the call without responding, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the sonogram, about the innocent child who would be born into this mess we'd created. A week later, my father showed up at my door again. Before you slam the door in my face, he said quickly, I came to apologize. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. Dad looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a slump to his usually straight shoulders. I was wrong, he said without preamble. I should have supported you unconditionally. You're my son, and I failed you when you needed me most. I didn't say anything, waiting for him to continue. The truth is, Dad sighed, I panicked. When Jake told me about the baby, all I could think about was how our family was falling apart. I thought if I could somehow keep everyone together, fix this somehow, but I was wrong. Some things can't be fixed. No, I agreed, they can't. Jake moved back home, Dad continued. He talks big about being there for Sarah and the baby, but he shook his head. He's still the same irresponsible kid he's always been. Last night, I found him drunk on the couch at 3 a.m. talking about how his life is over. Despite everything, I felt a familiar twinge of concern for my little brother. I squashed it immediately. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that I see things clearly now. What Jake did was unforgivable. What I did, taking his side, was also unforgivable. I don't expect you to forgive either of us, but I want you to know that I'm here for you however you need me to be. I felt tears stinging my eyes for the first time since this whole nightmare began. I don't know if I can ever trust any of you again, I admitted. Dad nodded sadly. I understand, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn back your trust if you'll let me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The following months were difficult. I threw myself into work, accepted a promotion that required long hours, and avoided any place where I might run into Jake or Sarah. Dad would call or text occasionally, and slowly, we began rebuilding our relationship. 4 months after that fateful night, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. Her pregnancy was obvious now, her belly round beneath her sweater. Our eyes met across the produce section, and for a moment, neither of us moved. She looked tired and sad, nothing like the vibrant woman I had fallen in love with. Despite everything, my heart ached at the sight of her. I could have turned and walked away. Part of me wanted to, but instead I found myself approaching her. "How are you?" I asked stiffly. "I'm okay," she said, clearly surprised I was speaking to her. "The baby's healthy, a girl," I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "How about you?" She asked, "Mark mentioned you got promoted. You talked to Mark." This surprised me. Sarah looked down. "Sometimes. He checks in on me, makes sure I'm eating properly, taking my vitamins. He's been kind despite everything." That sounded like Mark, always looking out for others, even those who had hurt his friends. "And Jake?" I couldn't help asking. Sarah's expression hardened. "He comes to the doctor appointments. Sometimes, when he remembers. Your dad has been more supportive than Jake, honestly." We stood in awkward silence for a moment. "I should go," I finally said. "Eric," Sarah called as I turned away. "I know you probably hate me and you have every right to, but I want you to know that losing you has been the greatest regret of my life. Not a day goes by that I don't wish I could undo what I did." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months, the woman I had loved, the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way, the woman who was now carrying my niece. "I don't hate you," I realized as I said it. "I'm not sure what I feel anymore." A small, sad smile flickered across her face. "That's more than I deserve." I nodded and walked away, my heart a little lighter than it had been in months. 2 weeks later, Dad called me in a panic. "Sarah's in labor," he said without preamble. 2 months early, they're worried about the baby." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, even as I felt my chest tighten with concern. "Because Jake is nowhere to be found." Dad's voice was tight with anger. "I've been calling him for hours. His roommate said he went out drinking last night and never came home." "That's not my problem," I said automatically, but the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. "I know," Dad sighed. I thought you should know, I'm at Memorial Hospital with her. Her parents live out of state and won't get here until tomorrow." After we hung up, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to Sarah, alone and scared in a hospital room. To my niece, fighting to survive before she'd even taken her first breath. Before I knew what I was doing, I was in my car, driving to the hospital. I found Dad in the waiting room, looking every bit his age. "Eric," he said, standing in surprise, "I didn't expect you to come." "Neither did I admitted. "How is she?" "In surgery, emergency C-section. The baby was in distress." I sat heavily in the chair next to him. "And Jake?" Dad's expression darkened, still not answering his phone. We sat in silence for what felt like hours until a doctor finally approached. "Family of Sarah Williams." We both stood. "She's out of surgery," the doctor said. "Both she and the baby are stable, but the baby is very small, just under 4 pounds. She'll need to stay in the NICU for a while." Relief washed over me. They were both alive. "Can we see them?" Dad asked. "Miss Williams is still in recovery, but you can see the baby in the NICU, just 2 visitors at a time." Dad looked at me questioningly. "You go," I said. "I'll wait here." But when Dad returned 30 minutes later, his eyes red-rimmed but smiling, he insisted I go see my niece. "She's beautiful, Eric," he said. "She has the family nose." Against my better judgment, I followed a nurse to the NICU. In a clear bassinet, surrounded by tubes and monitors, lay a tiny baby with a shock of dark hair. My breath caught in my throat. She was so small, so fragile. "You can touch her," the nurse encouraged. "Just through these openings here." Hesitantly, I reached in and stroked one tiny hand. Immediately, her fingers curled around mine and something inside me broke open. This was my niece, my blood, innocent of all the pain and betrayal that had led to her birth. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually the nurse told me Sarah was awake and asking for Jake. Her fiancé hasn't arrived yet, the nurse said, clearly assuming I was a relative but not the father. No, I confirmed, he hasn't. A surge of anger toward Jake rose within me. How could he leave Sarah alone at a time like this? Regardless of how their relationship had started, she was the mother of his child. Before I could think better of it, I found myself asking, "Can I see Sarah?" The nurse led me to a recovery room where Sarah lay, pale and exhausted, but awake. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Eric, what are you doing here?" "Dad called me," I said, hovering awkwardly by the door. I saw the baby, she's beautiful." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "You saw her, is she okay? They took her away so quickly." "She's small, but the nurse said she's doing well," I assured her. "Have you named her yet?" Sarah shook her head. "Jake and I couldn't agree on a name. He wanted to call her after some ex-girlfriend of his." The anger I felt toward my brother intensified. "Where is he?" Sarah asked, looking past me toward the door. I hesitated. "They haven't been able to reach him yet." Sarah closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Of course not. I don't know why I expected anything different." Against all reason, I found myself moving to her bedside, taking her hand. "I'm sorry," I said. "You shouldn't have to go through this alone." Sarah looked at me in surprise. "After everything I did to you, you're the one comforting me. You really are the best man I've ever known, Eric." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just squeezed her hand. "Would you like to help me name her?" Sarah asked hesitantly. "I know she's not, but you're her uncle and I value your opinion more than anyone's." I swallowed hard. "What were you thinking?" "I like Lily," Sarah said. "It was my grandmother's name." "Lily," I repeated, thinking of the tiny fighter in the NICU. "It suits her." Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. "Lily it is, then." Jake finally showed up the next day, hungover and full of excuses. Dad nearly threw him out of the hospital, and I had to step between them. "Not here," I hissed. "Not now." The look of surprise on Jake's face when he saw me was almost comical. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Being there for my niece," I said coldly. "Someone had to be." Jake had the grace to look ashamed. "I messed up, okay? I got scared." "You've been scared this whole time," I said. "That's your excuse for everything, but that baby in there." "Your daughter, she doesn't care that you're scared. She needs her father to step up." "Like you're such a perfect guy," Jake muttered, but there was no heat in it. "I know I screwed up, okay? With Sarah, with you, with everything. I don't know how to fix it." "Start by being there for your daughter," I said, "and then maybe we can talk about the rest." Over the next few weeks, as Lily gained strength in the NICU, a strange new normal emerged. I found myself visiting the hospital daily, sometimes running into Jake, sometimes Sarah, sometimes both. We were civil, if not friendly. One evening, as I sat beside Lily's incubator, Sarah entered the room. "Hey," she said softly, "the nurse said you've been here for hours." I nodded, not taking my eyes off Lily, who was finally breathing without assistance. "You don't have to do this, you know," Sarah said, sitting across from me. "Be here all the time. I know it must be painful for you." "She's my niece," I said simply, "and she needs people who care about her." Sarah studied me for a long moment. "You would have been an amazing father, Eric." The words cut deep. In another life, another reality, we might have been sitting here together watching our child. Not this way, with all the pain and betrayal between us. "Jake's trying," Sarah said, as if reading my thoughts. "He comes by every day now, brings books to read to her." "Good," I said, and meant it. Whatever my feelings toward Jake, Lily deserved a father who showed up. As Lily grew stronger and the day of her release from the hospital approached, Dad suggested a family dinner. "Just to discuss logistics," he said. "Sarah will need help and we should all be on the same page." I agreed reluctantly, and that Sunday found the four of us, Dad, Jake, Sarah, and me, sitting awkwardly around Dad's dining table. "I've been thinking," Dad began after an uncomfortable silence. "The guest house on my property has been empty since your aunt moved out. Sarah, you and Lily could stay there. It's small, but it would give you privacy while still having help nearby." Sarah looked surprised. "That's very generous, but—" "I think it's a great idea," Jake interrupted. "I could come by every day to help with Lily." I studied my brother. He seemed different somehow. More mature than I'd ever seen him. "What do you think, Eric?" Dad asked. All eyes turned to me. "I think," I said carefully, "that whatever helps Lily is the right choice." Sarah smiled gratefully at me. The dinner wasn't easy, but it wasn't as painful as I had feared. We talked about practical things, pediatrician appointments, baby supplies, a schedule for who would help when. For the first time in months, it felt like we were a family again. Broken, healing imperfectly, but a family nonetheless. As Sarah and Jake left together, Dad turned to me. "Thank you," he said, "for being here tonight, for being there for Lily." I'm not doing it for Jake or Sarah, I clarified. I'm doing it for Lily. I know, Dad nodded. But it means something that you're willing to be in the same room with them. It means there might be a path forward. I wasn't sure about that. The pain of betrayal still cut deep. But as I thought about Lily, about her tiny hand gripping my finger, I knew I couldn't walk away completely. A week later, Sarah and Lily moved into Dad's guest house. I helped carry boxes and furniture, setting up the nursery while Jake assembled the crib. We worked in silence, but it wasn't entirely uncomfortable. That night, as I was leaving, Sarah walked me to my car. I never thanked you properly, she said. For being there when Lily was born, for helping us move today, for everything. I'm not doing it for you, I reminded her. I know, she nodded, but it means a lot anyway, more than you know. She hesitated, then added, Jake asked me to marry him yesterday. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Oh, I said no, Sarah continued. I told him I couldn't build a life on the foundation of someone else's pain, that we both needed to focus on Lily and on becoming better people. I didn't know what to say to that. I'm not telling you this because I expect anything from you, Sarah said quickly. I wanted you to know that I understand the gravity of what we did, that I'm not just moving on like nothing happened. For the first time since that awful night, I felt something other than pain when I looked at her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps understanding. Good night, Sarah, I said softly. Good night, Eric. As I drove home, I thought about family, about betrayal, about forgiveness. I thought about my father saying family first and how wrong that had felt at the time, but maybe it wasn't that simple. Maybe family meant different things at different times. Right now, family meant a tiny baby girl who needed her uncle. It meant a father trying to rebuild trust with his son. It meant a brother striving, however imperfectly, to take responsibility for his actions. And maybe someday it would mean forgiveness. Not forgetting, not excusing, but choosing to move forward rather than remain anchored to pain. I wasn't there yet, but for the first time I could see a path forward. A different future than the one I had planned, but a future nonetheless. The next day, I bought a small teddy bear for Lily. As I placed it in her crib, watched over by both Sarah and Jake, I realized something. Family isn't just about blood or obligation, it's about choice. Every day we choose who to love, who to forgive, who to become. Today, I chose to be Lily's uncle. Tomorrow, who knows, but for now, that was enough.